Hello everybody and welcome back. My name is Curseof and welcome back to another video. Today we're here to do a breakdown slash analysis for the Yu-Gi-Oh! Speed Duel remote duel event that took place this past weekend. This is the biggest speed duel remote duel event to take place thus far and is probably one of the biggest Konami official speed duel events to take place in general. This event had 43 players enter. That's right, this was not one of your 8-man flights that usually go on at these extravaganzas. This was a speed duel main event, and you guys would know this if you checked out my last speed duel video. So if you didn't check it out, that's why you might not know this information. But there was a main event with some crazy prizes, these being prize cards like that of Jinzo, Book of Moon, Floodgate Trap Hole, the promos that were given to Europe but now were available for the US for North America. As just mentioned, this was a 43 player event and had many larger names in the speed duel community come out of retirement. For example, Vault was playing in this one. We had Terramaster playing in this one. Just these people that have been on hiatus due to the lack of product have come back and did actually play in this event. So we had a really crazy turnout, a lot of big names from the community, and yeah, without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into the breakdown. So the deck breakdown for this event is some information that has not been made public, but I was able to gather this by annoying and bothering not only staff from the extravaganza, but also the duelists that entered. So thank you so much to everyone who did give me the information needed for this video, but there you guys go. This is the breakdown of all the decks that were entered in this event. As you can see, 40 players is what is listed. That is because if you check out the note down here in the bottom left, only 40 of the 43 players actually participated in the event. So this is a 40 player breakdown for this event here. And as you can see, Icy Monarchs took up a huge chunk, actually almost hitting half of the decks entered in this event. And if you do look down through the list, you'll notice that every deck here is viable, barring maybe Skull Servants, but even that is a okay rogue strategy. Players coming into this event, coming into this extremely solved format, we're coming in to win and to get those prizes. So we see Icy Monarchs, XYZ Unions, Dark Moth, Beatdown Moth, shout out to Tensi for really making this deck a thing, and Apprentice Monarchs being the biggest representation. Along with that, TP Warrior is chilling at 3. It's an okay deck. People like their TP for some reason. And then we have one guy who wanted to go Skull Servants. Cool dude. Shout out to you. So as I just said, obviously the entire community in this extremely solved format, we're coming out to win this event, and as such we see the breakdown be very one-sided. Everyone essentially showed up to this event with meta, and thus the top 8 really isn't going to be that surprising, as you guys can see right here with the pie chart. So in the top 8, we had 3 Icy Monarch decks, we had 2 XYZ Union decks, we had 1 Beatdown Moth, 1 Dark Moth, and 1 Apprentice Monarchs. And if we take a quick look at the breakdown again, this pretty well makes sense. TP didn't top, but TP is also the worst of the meta decks that were entered. And we see the highest representation going down to the lowest representation be the representation of top 8 as well. So nothing here is really that surprising. If we do actually go a little bit more in depth about this top 8, the decks that did make it to the both top 4 and finals were IC decks and Moth decks, specifically IC Monarch decks and Moth decks. So XYZ Union got wiped out in top 8, and Apprentice Monarchs got wiped out in top 8 as well. So nothing too surprising there. Obviously IC really does get a decent portion of the top, not because it's necessarily the best deck, but because it was the most represented and by far the most popular deck. But as we do in every single breakdown that I do on this YouTube channel, we are going to go over every one of the top 8 lists. Obviously, this information is very well known because of Speed Duel League and Alam posting these lists. And with that mentioned, check out Alam, check out Speed Duel League. Both the YouTube channel and the Discord server will be linked in the description. But without further ado, let's hop into the first of the top 8 decks here. So the first deck I have to show you guys is the Apprentice Monarch deck. As you can see, this made it into the top 8, and obviously the whole concept of making it isn't that far-fetched. We do see Hades being played as a Monarch, but Hades was specifically better in the Extravaganza because of a ruling that Hades would negate Zoma, which is extremely relevant. Some weird things to point out about this deck and to actually bring to mention is the fact that the Apprentice engine isn't on 2 Vindictives, it's only on 1, which you don't see very often. Is definitely a more uncommon thing to see. Most decks are running 2 copies of Vindictive. Everything else is pretty standard, except for the fact that Waking the Dragon is in the main, making it a 21 card deck instead of a 20 card deck. Waking is already not my favorite card because it's so luck based. You know, you have to have your opponent hit that card, they have to have back removal, otherwise it is literally just a dead resource. But it can be good versus Moth and versus Icy, and it's, you know, we're breakers in the meta, it does come up a decent bit. But when you have a extra deck that looks like this, Waking becomes a lot less good. There's no need for Chimera. I don't know, I think that's Rabid Horseman. I don't know when you'd ever summon that. And yeah, I mean, under normal circumstances, you're really only gonna access Arcana and sometimes TER, so I get it. But it's good to have all the most viable options. If you're only on 1 copy of Waking, you really should run a standard extra deck, which hasn't changed since my last video. If you guys want to check that out, it will be up in the cards there right now. Moving into the next list here, we have a Vault's Icy Monarch deck here, and I'm going to start going through these lists a little bit faster as they get more standard. A Vault's deck is fairly standard here. Some weird things to bring up is the old Vindictives. Personally, wouldn't be my choice because Icy Monarch is a much more beatdown oriented deck. It is meant to push, and Vindictive is a very slow card. So not my favorite. It's obviously useful versus Moth, but it doesn't fit the IC strategy. I'd probably opt for another Zoma, maybe an Offerings, or maybe a 3rd Gaia. Just go more on the aggro here, but it worked out for him, obviously. Kaiku's a cute tech for versus XYZs. I do think Kaiku is a pretty alright card. But yeah, overall pretty standard. We do see Night Beam as some back row removal. Never hurts to have back row removal. Next, we have the XYZ lists here, and yeah, these are we're gonna go through these a lot faster now because XYZ is basically solved thanks to Ninjetti Ursus. He is the player that has topped almost every single event in the Battle City Box era, and yeah, this is literally his deck card for card, just piloted by Terramaster to top 8. Yeah, it's very standard. Then we have another XYZ deck in top 8. This one is also literally just Ninjetti's list, except we have a Offerings to the side, switched out for a 2nd copy of Lost Wind, and we have a Foolish in the main, switched out for a Sphere Karibo. Yeah, it's pretty much a solid deck. Moving swiftly into the top 4 here, we have TS Fearless with his Icy Monarch list. This one is a bit of a different one because it is specifically on 2 Monarchs. TS Fearless has been playing the Icy Monarch deck for a while and stands by the fact that it's the best deck in the format. I would argue XYZ is. XYZ just has a bigger learning curve than a deck like Icy Monarchs, but he's been doing very well with this deck, and he's always been opting for these 2 Monarchs and 2 Kaiser very specifically. I do think Kaiser is the best Monarch of this format, so I definitely agree with him there. Why only running 2? I don't know. I like to take full advantage and run a 3 of Monarchs. I want to go above 3, gets bricky, but I wouldn't go less because you still want to consistently see your cards. But obviously he found it out to work for him pretty fine, and you can also take advantage of Gaia as a Monarch sometimes, so maybe that came up for him a decent bit. Anyway, he's opting for 2. I'm interested to test too, and yeah, he's definitely my motivation for if I ever start playing 2 Monarchs. But continuing through his list and some card choices that I don't like just in general, is Nightmare Wheel. I think Nightmare Wheel is a lot worse in this format. It's good to hit sets, sure, but if you ever hit a face-up monster, your opponent can book it and stop the Nightmare Wheel's burn. It makes Nightmare Wheel overall just a much worse card than it normally would be, and especially with a lot of decks running tribute monsters like Icy, for example, it's also easy to just tribute off your monster, get rid of the Nightmare Wheel, and summon a bigger body. Jinzo's also running around a lot. It just turns off the Nightmare Wheel. I don't think Nightmare Wheel's that good of a card. We've seen a few people on it as of late, but I really don't like it personally, and I would stay off of that card. But otherwise, I think the deck is really, really cool. A lot of nice tech choices like Dust Tornado and Shrink. And obviously it went out really well for him. I will bring up one thing very specifically before we move on. I know I'm going on a little bit longer about this deck, but I think it has a lot of important things to bring up here. Defusion in the side deck. Defusion is essentially an alternative choice to Lost Wind. Why Defusion over Lost Wind though? So the big thing with Defusion is that it actually removes and outs the monster, while something like Lost Wind, although it does negate the monster's effects, it leaves the body on the field because a good XYZ monster is going to play their monster in. I said a good XYZ monster. Good XYZ player is going to play their monsters in defense, and you just have a big booty that you're going to struggle a lot to deal with. While something like Defusion is actually going to get that monster off the board. Very, very relevant. Plus, we see a lot of XYZ players booking their monster to stop the Lost Wind effect, while Defusion can basically circumvent that. It's a choice that's coming up a lot more often now, and I definitely think it has its pros. The next list we have here in the top 4 is JDG Justice, by the way. Terramaster is also a member of JDG, and if you don't know, I am also a member of JDG, so shout out to Judgment Gaming for getting 2 of the top 8 slots and getting some nice prize cards. Let's go. But anyway, we have Justice here with the Beatdown Moth deck. This is basically your like old Warrior Moth decks, but revitalized for the current format, playing Breakers and Charging Gaias and such. There really isn't much to talk about here. It genuinely is just the Moth engine, because Moth is an engine, played with a bunch of beatdown cards and a bunch of staples. Think of it as if you're playing Icy Monarchs, but you take out your Monarchs and a few extra cards and just switch up for a Cocoon skill. Yeah, that's basically it. Once again, Defusion in the side, but he's also opting for Lost Wind. The side deck's a lot of one-ofs, maybe doing some testing. Who knows? But yeah, obviously did very well for him. Got all the way up to top 4. Great job, man. Next off, we move into our second place list here, that being Maverick's Icy Monarch deck. He's playing the 3 Monarch ratio, as you can see. But overall, it is a pretty standard list. Not much to bring up, except for this. He has 2 copies of Waking. 2 copies of Waking in the side deck, but his extra deck is not built at all for 2 copies of Waking. I don't know if he just doesn't have the physical cards to properly fill out his extra deck for Waking, but this is definitely not the extra deck you want to be running for double Waking at all. You want to have 2 Arcanas. You might want to have 2 TERs. You definitely want to have a Ryu Senshi in there. This is not the extra deck you need to run for 2 Wakings. If you guys want me to cover some different extra decks for running 2 Wakings or 3 Wakings, I will. If you guys don't care about that content, that's fine. But if you do want to see it, leave a comment down below and tell me you want to see it. But yeah, no, definitely not the extra deck for 2 Wakings. The deck itself is very, very well built. It looks like a really, really solid deck, except for the extra deck. The extra deck actually matters here because of the Waking. Mind Crush is also a cute choice, but it does well against searchers. Like Summoner's Art for Colossus also does really well against Parasite. So Yeah, it makes sense. And then finally, we move in to the first place deck list. This is White Sauce playing Dark Moth. That's right, guys. Dark Moth, the deck that just OTKs you, took the entire event. None of us are happy to see this, but at the same time we are, because if Moth won the entire event, Konami knows that Moth is a force to be reckoned with. It is a really good deck. Dark Moth also only had 5 representation and took the entire event, which is very relevant to mention. But yeah, Konami knows that this deck is busted and that it needed to be hit, so hopefully we'll see you know, something get hit on a list. That would be really nice. But White Sauce's deck, this is first place. We got to talk about this one. No Santa Claus in the main. Why? I'm thinking maybe a lot of people aren't playing around Parasite like they used to. Obviously, with Dark Moth being on Santa Claus, setting doesn't always do enough for you. So a lot of people are getting very aggressive versus Moth, just trying to kill them before they are able to perform the Parasite play. And I can see it being taken advantage of and not requiring Santa in the main. We do see Santa on the side, along with that also Lava Golem. You know, makes sense. If you're not in the main deck, you probably want him on the side, because people will eventually play around Moth, or there will be some people who do set to play around, or just have inherently decks that set. But yeah, the other thing to bring up here, and maybe the more relevant thing, is that he is on a triple Moth variant. That means that if you were double Moth by White Sauce, it really wasn't that far-fetched for it to happen. He has 3 allures, he is digging through his deck constantly, and he has 3 copies of Moth. Along with that, if you did deal with 2 of his Moths earlier on in the game, he has a chance to summon a 3rd and actually put pressure on again with a Dark Moth variant, which can be very relevant. But yeah, no, I definitely have always liked the triple Moth variant, because if you're going for an OTK, you probably want to up the consistency of you actually doing the OTK. So I do like the triple Moth variants, and obviously did really well for him. Congrats, White Sauce. Great job, man. Also, he's a great guy. Genuinely a great guy. So, congrats. But yeah, if you guys made it this far in the video, thank you so much. If you did make it this far, go ahead and comment ban Moth down below. Ban Moth. Just so I know you made it this far. But thank you to everyone who watched this video, and congrats to everyone who did top the event. Great job, guys. It's really, really nice to see some support coming from Konami for the Speed Duel format. Hopefully we continue to get this support and we get another event like this in the future. But that's gonna be a wrap from me. Sorry it took a little bit longer to get this video out than originally planned, but it's here. I'll catch you guys sometime in the future for another video. That's a wrap, guys. Peace.